Hello.
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 And welcome to another episode of Mondays with
Meg.
and Tom.
And here we are.
And here we are.
And you have the topic for today.
And today I'm calling the shots, so to speak. Because I didn't know what other conversation my brain could have around resurrection. And so this morning, in my morning feed, scrolling, cooking breakfast, Instagramming, I came across something that then made me think about, I guess it was a combination of that, and we've been reading from Revelation since Easter, because that goes with the Easter season.
Yeah, a lot of passages on Sundays.
Yeah, and so then I've been thinking, I think about it a lot, but more lately, or maybe more intense lately, the concept of the new creation.
Which I think is attached to Revelation, so we really aren't off topic.
Great. But so it's this, my favorite professor always says every week it's a big thing for him, and so I think that's why it's becoming a big thing for me. But there's hope always because God is making all things new.
Mm-hmm.
And that's and I don't know if the last 2.5 years, because I think we're at the half-year point now of the world changing. I don't know if the last 2.5 years have just been so miserable, politically, and then the pandemic, and then all the racial injustice, and then inequality, and all this stuff that's really seemed I'm sure all that kind of stuff has been happening, but it's the last 2.5 years have felt here it is all at once almost. I don't know. And so it's that thinking of, even with all of the chaos,
right,
and all the crappiness, there is still a reason to hope because God is making all things new.
And so that's a phrase from Isaiah, right?
I think that's Isaiah.
It's Isaiah. It's also found in Revelation. It is something we say a lot in the church. Mm-hmm. But here comes the big question is,
come on,
when you begin to break that down, what does that mean? How does that tie into experience? What are you saying with that? Beyond an expression of hope.
Right.
That, it's the old Beatles song, it's getting better all the time, couldn't get much worse. It's
Right. Well, I think it's so, man, my brain is trying to answer that question rapidly.
Okay, slow down, brain.
I'm trying to slow it down. So, what I think, my answer to that question, I think it has a lot to do with thinking about, we've been in Mark, and so it's with our Bible study, and so it's the kingdom of God has drawn near.
Right.
And come on, it's there. I think the kingdom drawing near, and that the concept and the thought process around new creation, or God is making all things new. Mm-hmm. I think it's they're doing this. It's that's what's closing the gap.
Okay.
Does that comment make sense?
Yeah, but I want you to try to break it down even further.
Keep going. Okay.
Because it's easy with this to get lost in theological speech, and we say the words, and oh man, that word sounds good. That phrase, I like the way that phrase feels. Mm-hmm. But then we don't go beyond that
Right. It's like we say the thing and then
We say the thing,
there's comfort in the way this sounds.
but what is
and
the
then-
thing that we're actually saying?
We move on.
I mean, when you talk about new creation, is it some supernatural event? Is this like our liberal Protestant left behind concept?
No.
The sort of thing, except
Well, that's not.
it's other stuff happening. I mean, but it's this more supernatural. Is it that world? Is it
No, my
more
brain
practical?
doesn't. More practical. I
Okay.
think my brain. I take a more practical approach. Man, I really don't like the left behind stuff. That's.
I know. And I read an article with Left Behind something today or yesterday, and that's why it jumped
And so
into
now
my
it's
mind.
there.
It's in my mind.
Right. No, so I think it's a more practical thing. I think it's like the world that we are living in now.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine that with everything going on and the way everything is and the way humanity is,
Mm-hmm.
that this right now is the way that God intended this to be.
Okay.
Because that one goes back to the character of God conversation that we've been talking about a lot with the youth.
This does not seem to reflect who God is.
Right.
And so you wouldn't say that this is a sort of a natural case of entropy, and that's also God's plan, that it just is going to go, so to speak, all to hell.
We're just
And then
going
God
to
steps
doom
in and makes
spiral.
everything new. Or is there something else, is that the new creation? It's always there out. It's that thing that's out there. Or is it something that's supposed to be happening now?
I think it's supposed to be happening now.
Okay.
I think that even though there is the chaos, like the tohu vavohu, like the Hebrew, like the chaos,
Mm-hmm.
even though that's very much here, I think there's something else happening.
Okay.
And I never think that that God is just gonna go all better.
Right.
Like I don't think that's how it works. I think in thinking about the new creation and God making everything new, as much as God is an active participant, we are also an active participant in bringing about that new creation.
Okay. And in that sense, to me, that's where resurrection is there, because we're using what's here. It's
Right.
not about wiping the slate clean.
Correct.
And then just putting a new thing down.
Right.
So when you're talking about new creation, it is about new creation occurring within the old.
Right.
So even when we talk about, we have the language of the body of
Mhm.
Christ, now the resurrected body, it still shows the signs of
Right.
death and
Right.
the signs of
That's
crucifixion.
still
and
there.
there's the hole in the side.
Right.
But then Jesus also gets hungry and wants to, keeps asking them for food.
Or he wants to eat. Right.
But then he can also disappear.
He makes a meal once or
Right,
twice. Like,
right.
yeah.
So, but it's still the point being is that body is the
That didn't
same
go away.
body. It didn't go away, but
Right.
it was somehow transformed into something different.
Right.
So resurrection has the element of transformation rather
Right.
than crumple up,
Toss
throw it in the trash,
Start
and
over.
let's start all over again
Right.
with something wholly different.
Right.
Which again, I think with a lot of the theology we have encountered, like the Left Behind stuff,
Right.
there's a lot of that kind of thought behind it.
Right. And I think like that would maybe be easier and feel safer and more comfortable
Mm-hmm.
for a lot of folks, like if that's just how it were to happen.
Right.
But I don't think that's the reality.
Right.
I don't think that's what's happening.
Do you think that maybe some of it has to do with this sort of question or feeling of responsibility, because that is always for theologians.
Like I'm responsible for,
or I'm just not responsible for that. For new creation happening, you had said there's a partner where we're kind of connected.
Yeah, we have to actively
it's not
participate.
Just God. You're right. We have to also actively participate. There's something about our actions.
Right.
But it's not on our shoulders. We don't make the new creation. There's something about God and humanity being together.
Right.
Which again, with our Revelation readings, that seems, the God dwelling with people. It's not all up to us. It's not all up to God. There's something about that.
The togetherness.
Combination that makes.
Well, and that's like if you go way back to the creation narrative, in the beginning, and the way that God intends for that relationship to be between God and the people.
Right.
And thinking about that relationship in Revelation, like we're just trying to close that gap.
Right. Getting back, not necessarily getting back to exactly the way it was.
Right.
Because I don't know if, it's not a new Eden, right? It's a new heaven and earth. So they're both have changed. Mm-hmm. They're different. Or even the new Jerusalem, it's different.
It's different, right.
But it's still kind of the same. I mean, there's something about that. So it's still this world and us in it, but it's different. And I think the thought that's itching in the back of my brain is there's always the warning that we don't equate our progress or lack of progress with the coming kingdom or God's work of new creation. That if these last few years have seen really kind of we're moving in the wrong direction, then as faithful Christians, Reformed Christians, we're not to take that as a sign that God is abandoning us, or it's God's failure, or our faith has no point. It's not to bring us down.
No, I think for me, I guess in the way that I look at it is it's always like the night is always darkest before the dawn. But that's like the best way that I can, and it's just like Good Friday comes and that's the end. That's it.
Right.
And then the dawn on the third day is way more magnificent than we could have envisioned.
I think that's maybe some of the potential of these last few years, and we're seeing a lot more of the ugly side of our humanity and things, the vision and it seems like, we hear a lot more about that hatred for the other. Right.
And it's that us versus them.
Us versus them, the division, when there's been crisis after crisis, rather than draw together, we're more about the blame rather than the
you did and you said it.
And we're seeing that, and it could be that from all of that is that helpful. Could be the helpful of a period of rejection. Mm-hmm. We're done with this.
Right.
We know this doesn't work, or or it will consume ourselves. Consume us. That's the other piece of it there.
I think one of the things that I feel like I've noticed a lot is, I'm on social media a lot. Mm-hmm. It consumes a lot of my morning and my evening. I like to scroll, and I like to look at things. And one of the things that I think I've noticed is for all the division and the negative stuff that I'm seeing. First of all, it's been interesting to kind of watch people that I'm friends with and to be like, oh, I did not know you thought in such a way. And then to watch the other half, and I don't think it's 50-50, but the other part and being yes, if I was going to go to a rally for something, you are the friend that I would ask to come with me because I see what you're saying and I see what you're doing. And so it's been interesting to see in the last few years, like as much as the negative and the chaos and the brokenness and the gross, disgusting parts of humanity that are like showing itself
on display.
Right, yeah. That for as much as that's happening, there's also this other part of people continuing to stand up and say, "Oh, I've had enough of that.
Mm-hmm.
That's not it. That's not working. That's not who I want to be. That's not the world that I want my children to live into." And so then it's like, well, how do we change that? And I think that's the big thing that I'm noticing is it's not, well, you have to change. It's, well, you're not going to change. How do we change this part?
Something new has to be created in me.
Right.
Because it is fruitless for me to constantly say, you're the problem, and something, either you need to go away.
Right.
I need to destroy or dominate you.
Right.
More than I need to lift up.
Right.
I need to enlighten. I mean, that to me, again, there's that question of what's the point of a personal faith? Mm-hmm. A personal faith kind of helps you do that kind of.
Right.
It should help you focus back on yourself.
Right. It's that introspective.
It's introspective. It is thinking about life and meaning and what is this about.
Right.
So you had mentioned Mark, and when we talked about that second chapter in Mark, with the familiar story of the friends with their paralytic.
Right, lowering their buddy through the roof.
They've got their paralytic buddy, and it's the four friends, and they go through extraordinary measures and do the roof and lower.
Which that took a long time. Like it wasn't just like.
Right, it wasn't easy to do, but they're working together for the benefit of their friend, and
not even for them.
Not for them. They're not going to get anything out of it. And in that story in Mark, there it's Jesus notices their faith,
right?
And yet it's interesting. Does he say your faith has made you well?
I think he says their faith.
Their faith.
Yeah.
I don't know. That'd be interesting to look at again.
Curious.
Whose faith is it? We don't have to do it now. It's all right.
Right.
But that was one. But then other people, because he forgives the paralytic man his sins, and then it causes people to go, wait a minute,
you can't do that.
You can't do that.
Right. Only God can do that.
Right. But that's sort of a sign. He's like, as we talked about, it's like, yeah, human beings, forgiveness is a sign of the kingdom.
Right.
You can't get closer. You can't have anything new happen if you can't forgive.
Right.
I mean,
you can't close the gap in the relationship between you and God if you can't close the gap in the relationship between me and you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And again, faith has that language. I mean, these stories are examples. They're things to help us think and feel and aspire to.
Right.
But too often we get to be like the scribes in that story who are like, no, wait a minute, that's against the rules.
Right.
And we can't do that.
Right.
You can't do that.
Right.
And that whole second chapter of Mark is that way, where it's Jesus starts to bump up against the rules.
Right.
But the rules and the way things aren't showing God, aren't showing what could be, aren't allowing
it's like there's
for creation.
No room for the kingdom there because the way the rules are.
So when we get to Paul, and when you preach on Galatians 5, and the fruit of the Spirit is, and it's always, love, peace.
Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. Promise to work that in there somehow. It's funny, that's what I'm teaching in chapel. That's what we did on chapel on Monday and we'll do on Thursday.
But all of these are elements of the new creation, right?
Right.
They're elements when we talk about a very practical sense. They're elements of the kingdom of God. These are aspects that define
Right.
what the kingdom of God is about.
Right. And even like there's in the beginning of the Galatians passage, where Paul is talking about, oh man, it was there in my brain.
You're not talking about the works of the flesh.
No, where he's talking about, like no longer being in slavery. Like as you're freed, guess what? You have to go back and help free other people.
Right.
Like that's.
It's not your freedom is not there for your benefit.
Right.
It is to strengthen
It is
you.
there for the.
Then to go
back and
to be an agent of freedom.
Right.
For others, to
Right.
help others be free. But that freedom is defined through these fruits of the Spirit.
Fruits of the Spirit. Right.
The certain quality
Right.
of a human being. It's, and when he talks about the works of the flesh, it's enmity, strife,
Right.
quarrels.
Right.
It's all this stuff
Right.
that keeps us apart.
Right.
Whether it's from
It's like we
one
as
another.
people are always going to get that wrong.
Right, but it does not promote or bring about the kingdom.
Right.
You can't hate the kingdom into existence.
Right. That'll never work.
It won't work. You can't beat someone else in submission to
Right.
bring the kingdom in.
Right.
And so with a lot of our theology, looking to see what is the underlying piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you throw it out in the future and it's this future day when God, through Christ will finally bring the sword to the world.
Right.
Enough of that cross stuff. That doesn't work. Ultimately, what God's going to do is do the beat down.
Right.
And that's going to usher in the new. But, we just sort of toss over the whole
Right.
cross
Well, then you get rid of
concept.
what. Right.
And we just
You're
get
like,
rid of a
that
story.
needs to be there.
Right. And it was sort of like, recently where I don't even want to say his name. There was a particular person who said out loud, these methods that would be like the fruit of the Spirit, that's not working for us. That's not getting us to where we need to be. We need to do works of the flesh things because that works.
Yeah.
But this stuff does not work for us. And he's speaking, to Christians,
Right.
that we need to give up on that stuff.
You just
We
want
need
to
to
be
get
like,
we need to get rid of this
"Hey,
cross
buddy."
stuff,
Right.
and we need to grab more swords.
Right.
That's really what we need. Less crosses, more swords.
No, thank you.
But isn't that what the teaching is? And
Right.
isn't that where, again, what is the kingdom? Is it more when there's more crosses that are being carried than there are swords being
Right.
brandished? It doesn't bring in the kingdom, but suddenly that's what makes the kingdom appear.
Right.
And so as an individual, you do your part,
Mm-hmm.
but you yourself can't make it happen. I
Right.
mean, this is more.
But
this
you
is
have to
more
be an
the
active
Spirit of God.
participant
You
in
have to be
it.
an active participant in it. It's the Spirit of God living through
Right.
people.
What's that indwelling?
Indwelling. I mean,
Right.
these are all things we had talked about,
Right.
right? Isn't that what makes resurrection unique?
Right.
Is there's no separation anymore
Makes
between
resurrection.
Yeah,
Like,
there's
that's
there's no separation between God and humanity
Right.
anymore. And isn't that the final thing?
that's what we're.
But as long as we keep employing these ungodly
Right.
actions
Well, as long as
or
we keep doing the us
motivations
and
or-
them thing, then
that's ungodly.
right.
That's very ungodly. That was this, past week. That's Peter suddenly realizing that, with
You're
with
having
his
the aha
vision,
moment.
with his vision of
Right.
what I have called clean,
Right.
don't say it's profane.
Right.
And so a lot of that New Testament is crossing the line.
Well, it's like, Peter's like, who am I to hinder?
Who am I to hinder the work of God?
Right.
What if I tried in my own little way to be more godlike, godly, Christ-like?
What would that look like? What would that do?
And as more people, I mean, that's always what people sort of say. If all the Christians in the world right now actually behaved Christ-like,
right? Oh man,
how would that suddenly change the world? And is that what that means, that the kingdom of God has come near? Because he doesn't say it's here.
Right, he doesn't say right now it's here, ta-da.
Right, and he doesn't talk about some supernatural event happening that wipes everything else out. You know, it's not the big God atom bomb that, and then we build on top of everything. The way it's supposed to be. I mean, that's not.
Right.
So in that way, isn't that also what resurrection is?
I knew this wasn't far off from our topic.
It's not necessarily about biological death, but it's about spiritual life. Mm-hmm. Overwhelms everything. Overtakes everything.
Takes over.
The life that comes through the Spirit.
Yeah. So then, like, how do... Maybe this makes it and maybe it doesn't, but it's like...
You like saying that.
Well, yeah, because I don't know what's gonna...
Sorry, I didn't mean to knock you off thought.
No, it's okay. It's just one of those things that it's just like... It's pretty clear sometimes that Christians have opposing views on what the kingdom should look like.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like stressful.
Well, it is stressful. But, again, isn't that those wonderful touchstones that things like the fruit of the Spirit? I mean, if it doesn't have these qualities to it. This isn't there, then maybe that's a good clue.
Right.
But this maybe is not the way forward. I mean, if all your church messaging is hatred and why you're better and why the enemy has to be opposed and
taken out
and we need to arm ourselves and there's a war coming. I mean, I think we talked on that a little bit. If everything is a war to you, you're already starting not with reconciliation, which is what all of 1 Corinthians about.
But with
Paul's
bloodshed,
theology.
like that's
you're about you're
that's
about
you
bloodshed.
Right.
War is not reconciliation. War is not peacemakers.
Right.
You don't become a peacemaker through war.
Right.
And if we can't make that simple connection.
Right. Well, and I think that's a frustrating aspect that I'm sure you notice as well. It's like so much of the hatred and the bloodshed and all that is done in the name of God.
We find a way to justify
it. And it's like,
way.
I'm sorry, what?
On.
Right, like...
Do you not see how this...
Right.
And again, that's that, do I carry the cross or do I pull the sword?
Right.
Which is going to be my weapon?
Right.
Am I going to find a way to love my way through this problem, or am I going to find a way
to stamp my way through?
To dominate or to be in control?
Yeah.
I mean, I think, again, that word, I always talk about control, it seems like. I think control is, you're already in the wrong frame.
Right.
Because if you're going to be in control, that's what those Gentiles do.
Right,
they lord it over.
Right.
And that's, you don't lord over.
Right.
Jesus was like radical service.
Right.
And
like the ultimate servant, right there.
That's the way you change things, through radical service.
Right.
through self-giving love.
Right.
And, you know,
not through
again,
stomping and sword swinging.
Right.
Yeah.
But I love you, Meg.
Yeah.
Stab.
Right.
Stabby. Can't
Like
you
that
see
last
how
one.
much I love you?
Stabby was my favorite part. Stabby. But yeah, like it's like that's not bringing about the kingdom.
No, I think we get stuck in that,
Right.
and maybe again, maybe that's the, you know, there's a theory out there that at around this time is like a cycle of every 500 years. There's a Reformation in Christianity. And maybe that's what's brewing the Reformation. I mean, we're seeing a lot of people just kind of going, that's not it. I think people are realizing it.
Yeah.
I think there's but the problem is, instead of dropping those attributes and that path, and still being on a path of a certain
like you're kind of just dropping it all.
We just drop it all,
right.
and we just we just throw up our hands.
Because
that's
the
not
easier
going to do
thing
anything.
to do.
That's not going to do anything either.
Right.
You know, apathy also is not the way of the kingdom.
Right.
It is not. There is no resurrection in not
that
caring.
Active participation part.
Right. I mean, God had to care enough.
Right. Yeah.
It's not that Jesus was on the cross and went, oh well, that plan went wrong.
Right. Well, that didn't work.
That.
No, guess what? I think
I didn't see it going
work.
in that direction. Oh
Not
well.
how I saw that one going.
That's right.
No, it's like that went the way it's supposed to go.
So I mean, that to me, it is a clear time for a reform,
right.
a reformation. But it's got to be. It's not a rule reformation. It's not that we don't have our rules right.
Right.
It's not some kind of Pharisaic led reformation.
That's not what we're going for.
It's going back again to the law of love. You know, that whole Mark chapter 2 was Jesus sort of saying, you've got your rules, but your rules are stopping you from seeing the people.
Right.
You know,
your rules are stopping you from doing this part.
What would be good for the person in front of you.
Right.
You know, you're complaining that I can't, people aren't, only God can forgive sins, that we aren't allowed to forgive one another sins. Well, that just keeps us locked.
Right. Yeah, it keeps us stuck.
It gets us stuck.
Right.
So, I mean, it makes for the wonderful story, you know, which is easier for me to let go of somebody's sins and offer forgiveness to them so that they might be able to move forward in God, or, you know, to take up your mat and walk.
Yeah, what's the easier one?
And you know, when it gets,
it would be easier to say,
right,
take your mat
and then
go.
and the last one in that one is about the Sabbath stuff and all the rules about Sabbath, and you gotta follow the rules and don't question the rules and authority rules and da 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 da. And he's like, you know, the Sabbath was meant as a benefit for people, not as a burden,
not as an
extra burden for us to carry. And then we laugh at the times where he heals somebody on the Sabbath, and they're still, you know, it's the wonderful exaggeration.
Right.
How dare you heal someone on the Sabbath? You could do that on the next day, or you should have come the day before,
the day after,
but not this day. And that's the whole point of it. And I think we're still, the truth of that is not the fact of trying to figure out the fact and proving the fact that this happened or didn't happen. It's about what that reveals of our nature and how we get to be. You know, sometimes you just need to love somebody whether they fit your social rules or not.
Right.
And I get so tired of
Yeah.
having to say that again.
Well, I don't think
Stop
that you're
condemning. Maybe just.
I don't think that's going anywhere. I think we're always
That's right.
going to have to say those things.
Is condemning and shaming, is that really creating the world you want? Maybe
Right.
maybe there's another way.
Right.
Maybe it's already been shown
Maybe
to
there's
us.
another way to do it. Yeah,
You know?
maybe somebody else did it already.
And we just have to actually pick up that practice
Right.
that has been shown.
We just have to follow.
But the rules are the rules. And God follows rules.
Yeah, okay.
Does God follow the rules, or does God make all things new again? Behold, I am doing a new thing.
God
Do you
makes all
not
things new
perceive
again.
it? I love that part. That comes with it. Do you not perceive it?
There's the. So this wasn't off topic.
No, I
They
think it
was
was
right
pretty good.
there with it.
I think it's stuff that needs to be said, and it fits. Again, why is a theology of resurrection
And
perhaps
important.
better than a theology of heaven and hell, reward, punishment, that kind of, where that leads versus
Right.
where
this
resurrection
goes.
may take you
Right.
in thought and deed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a good, yeah. I'm really happy that went somewhere. I was a little nervous, but I had things I wanted to say, and I got to say them.
And you did a great job on this Monday with Meg.
And Tom.
And that's it for us. We'll see you next time.
See you later, alligator.
Bye.